Good morning, this is Mrs. Cruz, and this is part 1 of our Thursday task, where we will be reading pages 31 to 41. So we are ending chapter 6, and we'll be answering text amendment question number 4. Recapping a little from yesterday we answered text amendment question number 3, where Mama was explaining to Cassie really about racism, so it was a really good conversation she was able to have. And then we're going to close chapter 6, really looking at Uncle Hammer again. A little bit more about him. Okay, so scrolling down, we left off at about page 30. Okay, here's where we left off. So it ends up saying, I think I'm just going to go back and read this little paragraph again because I like what Mama said and I think it's really important. She said, "Of course they aren't," Mama said. "White people may demand our respect, but what we give them is not respect, but fear. What we give our own people is far more important because it's given freely. Now you may have to call Lily and Jean Miss because the white people say so, but you'll also call our own ladies at church Miss because you really do respect them." Okay, I do like what she says here because it's basically telling Cassie that they're playing kind of like the rules set for them in life, but at the same time they're finding ways to really demonstrate that they are living, I guess it's kind of like they're going to follow the rules, but at the same time not let that rule the way that they live their own lives. So I like that. Okay, let's keep going. "Baby, we have no choice of what color we're born, or who our parents are, or whether we're rich or poor. But we do have some choice over what we make of our lives once we're here. Mama cut my face in her hands, and I pray to God you'll make the best of yours." She hugged me warmly, then motioned me under the covers. As she turned the lamp down, I asked, "Mama, Uncle Hammer, if Mr. Morrison can't stop him, what'll happen?" "Mr. Morrison will bring him back." "But just what if he can't and Uncle Hammer gets to Mr. Sims?" A shadowy fear fleeted across her face, but disappeared with a dimming light. I think you've done enough growing up for one day, Cassie," she said without answering my question. "Uncle Hammer will be all right. Now go to sleep." Mama had been right about Uncle Hammer. When I awoke the next morning and followed the smell of frying ham and baking biscuits into the kitchen, there he sat at the table drinking coffee with Mr. Morrison. He was unshaven and looked a bit bleary-eyed, but he was all right. I wondered if Mr. Sims looked so good. I didn't get a chance to ask because as soon as I had said good morning, Mama called me into her room where a tub of hot water was waiting by the fireplace. "Hurry up," she said. "Uncle Hammer is going to take us to church." "In his car?" Mama's brow furrowed. "Well, I just don't know. He said something about hitching up Jack." My smile faded, but then I caught this teasing glint in her eyes, and she began to laugh. "Ah, Mama," I laughed and splashed into the water. After my bath, I went into my room to dress. When I rejoined Mama, she was combing her hair, which fanned her head like an enormous black halo. As I watched, she shaped the long thickness into a large chignon at the nape of her neck and stuck 630 hairpins in it. Then, giving the chignon a pat, she reached for her pale blue cotton dress sprinkled with tiny yellow and white flowers and polished white buttons running from top to bottom along its front. She glanced down at me. "You didn't comb your hair." "No, I want you to fix it for me. My grown-up hairdo." Mama began buttoning the top of her dress with long, fine fingers as I slowly fastened the lower buttons to help. I loved to help Mama dress. She always smelled of sunshine and soap. When the last button had slipped into place, she buckled a dark blue patent leather belt around her tiny waist and stood ready except for her shoes. She was very pretty. "Where's your brush?" "Right here," I said, picking up the brush from where I had laid it on the chair. Mama sat down in Papa's rocking chair, and I sat down on the deerskin rug right in front of her. Mama divided my hair from ear to ear into 2 sections and braided the front section to the side and the back section right into the center. Then she wound each braid into a flat chignon against my head. My hair was too thick and long for me to do it myself, but Mama could do it perfectly. I figured I looked my very best that way. When Mama finished, I ran to the mirror and then turned facing her with a grin. She grinned back and shook her head at my vanity. "One day, Mama, you gonna fix my hair like yours?" "That'll be a few years yet," she answered, readjusting the cardboard lining she had placed in her shoes to protect her feet from the dirt and gravel, which could easily slip through the large holes in her soles. She set the shoes on the floor and stepped into them. Now, with the soles facing downward and Mama's feet in them, no one could tell what the shiny exteriors hid. Yet I felt uncomfortable for Mama and wished that we had enough money for her to have shoes fixed, or better yet, still buy new ones. At breakfast, Stacy, Christopher John, Little Man, and I sat impatiently by the dying morning fire, waiting for Mama, Big Ma, and Uncle Hammer. Uncle Hammer was dressing in the boys' room, and Mama was in with Big Ma. I checked to make sure none of them was about to appear, when leaned towards Stacy and whispered, "You think Uncle Hammer whipped Mr. Sims?" "No," said Stacy quietly. "No," cried Little Man. "You mean Mr. Sims whipped Uncle Hammer?" stammered an unbelievable Christopher John. "Nothing happened," said Stacy. An explanation as he tugged irritably at his collar. "Nothing?" I repeated, disappointed. "Nothing." "How do you know?" asked Little Man suspiciously. "Mama said so. I asked her straight out this morning." "Oh," replied Little Man, resigned. "But something must have happened," I said. "I mean, Uncle Hammer and Mr. Morrison look like they haven't been able to get to bed. How come they look like that if nothing happened?" Mama said Mr. Morrison talked all night to Uncle Hammer, talked him tired, and wouldn't let him go up to the Simses. "Ah, shoot," I exclaimed, my dream of revenge against the Sims vanishing as Stacy talked. I propped my head on my knees, then settled my head in the upraised hands and stared into the glowing embers. A burning knot formed in my throat, and I felt as if my body was not large enough to hold the frustration I felt, not deep enough to drown in the rushing anger. "It ain't fair," Christopher John sympathized, patting me lightly with his pudgy hand. "Sho ain't," agreed Little Man. "Cassie," Stacy said softly. At first, I didn't look at him, thinking he would go ahead and say what he had to say. But when he didn't, I turned toward him. He leaned forward secretively, and automatically, Christopher John and Little Man did the same. Y'all better be glad nothing happened," he said in a whisper. "Cassie, I heard Big Ma tell Mama last night that if Mr. Morrison didn't stop Uncle Hammer might have gotten killed." So I'm going to highlight this last part because it kind of shows a little bit about Uncle Hammer. The fact that someone had to stop him before he did something he would maybe regret later. Okay, let's keep going. "Killed?" we echoed as the fire sputtered and died. "Who'd do that?" I cried. "Not one of them puny Simses." Stacy started to speak, but then Mama and Big Ma entered and cautioned us to silence. When Uncle Hammer joined us, freshly shaven and in another suit, the boys and I put our coats and headed for the door. Uncle Hammer stopped us. "Stacy, that the only coat you got, son?" he asked. Stacy looked down at his faded cotton jacket. Everyone else did too. The jacket was too small for him, that was obvious, and compared to Little Man's and Christopher John's and mine, it was admittedly in sadder shape. Yet we were all surprised that Uncle Hammer would ask about it, for he knew, as well as anyone, that Mama had to buy our clothes in shifts, which meant that we each had to wait our turn for new clothes. Stacy looked at Mama, then back to Uncle Hammer. "Yes, sir," he answered. Uncle Hammer returned with a long box, store wrapped in shiny red paper, and a fancy green ribbon. He handed the package to Stacy. "It was supposed to be your Christmas present, but I think I'd better give it to you now. It's cold out there." Gingerly, Stacy took the box and opened it. "A coat!" cried little man joyously, clapping his hands. Woo! Mama said reverently. Go ahead, Stacy, try it on. Stacy eagerly slipped on the coat. It was much too big for him, but Mama said she would take up the sleeves and that he would grow into it another year. Stacy beamed down at the coat, then up at Uncle Hammer. Years ago, he would have shot into Uncle Hammer's arms and hugged him thanks, but now, at the manly age of 12, he held out his hand and Uncle Hammer shook it. Come on, we better go, said Mama. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this because it also tells us about Uncle Hammer, the fact that he notices that Stacy has a jacket that is pretty old, and his response is to come back and gift him one. I think that, to me, shows that he's thoughtful and caring, so I'm going to highlight that part. Okay, let's read a little bit more. The morning was gray as we stepped outside, but the rain had stopped. We followed the path of budded rocks that led to the barn, careful not to slip into the mud, and got into the Packard, shining clean and bright from the washing. Uncle Hammer and Mr. Morrison had given it after the breakfast. Inside the Packard, the world was a wine-colored luxury. The boys and I, in the back, ran our hands over the rich, full seats, timidly fingered the fancy door handles and window knobs, and peered down amazed at the plush carpet peeping out on either side of the rubber mats. Mr. Morrison, who was not a church-going man, waved goodbye from the barn and sped away. As we drove into the school grounds and parked, the people milling in front of the church turned, staring at the Packard. Then Uncle Hammer stepped from the car, and someone cried, "Well, I'll be doggone! It's our Hammer Logan, and in a body." The crowd engulfed us. TJ ran up with Mo Turner and little Willie Wiggins to admire the car. "It's Uncle Hammer's," said Stacy proudly. But before the boys could sufficiently admire the car, Mama and Big Ma shooed us toward the church for the service. It was then that TJ noticed Stacy's new coat. Uncle Hammer gave it to him. I said, "Ain't it something?" TJ ran his fingers over the lapels and shrugged. "It's all right, I guess, if you like that sort of thing." "All right," I cried, indignant about his casual reaction to the coat. "Boy, that's the finest coat you ever did lay your eyes on, and you know it." TJ sighed. "I like it all right, if you like looking like a fat preacher." Then he and little Willie Mo laughed and went on ahead. Stacy looked down at the coat with his long sleeves and wide shoulders. His smile faded. He don't know what he's talking about," I said. "He's jealous, that's all." "I know it," snapped Stacy sourly. As we slid into the pew in front of TJ whispered, "Here comes the preacher," then leaned forward and said silently, "How do you do, Reverend Logan?" Stacy turned on TJ, poked him hard. "Mom was looking," I whispered, and then turned back around. After church, as TJ and the others looked longingly at the car, Mama said, "Stacy, maybe TJ wants a ride." Before Stacy could reply, I spoke up hurriedly. "No, ma'am. Mama, he got something to do." Then, under my breath, so that I was not guilty of a lie, I added, "He got to walk home like you always do." "That'll teach him," whispered little man. "Yeah," agreed Christopher John, but Stacy sulked by the window and said nothing. The sun was out now, and Uncle Hammer suggested that we take a real ride before going home. He drove us the full 22 miles up to Strawberry, by way of the Jackson Road, one of the two roads leading to the town. But Mama and Big Ma objected so much to going through Strawberry that he turned the big car around and headed back toward home, taking the old soldiers' road. Supposedly, rebel soldiers had once marched up the road and across Soldiers' Bridge to keep the town from falling into the hands of the Yankee army, but I had my doubts about that. After all, who in his right mind would want to capture Strawberry or defend it either, for that matter? Okay, we'll pause here and we will finish everything in the next part of the reading.